Welcome to Chapter 75 of the Strength Culture presents Quantum Lifting Podcast. And today we have Lucy Hendricks joining us all the way from the United States. Can you just give us a little bit of a background on yourself, you as a coach, what you do, who you are?
Yes, thank you for having me. So my name's Lucy Hendricks. I'm a personal trainer in Lexington, Kentucky, and I own a gym with my business partner. His name's Dave Wilton. And we've owned it for about 4 years, almost 4 years now. Or maybe it has been 4 years or 3. I'm not sure. 2020 has thrown up everything. And we really pride ourselves of making exercise an enjoyable thing for people who normally wouldn't enjoy exercise. And those are the people who may have really busy lifestyles or demanding jobs or passions that really keep them not able to get into exercise or an exercise routine, or people in persistent pain, chronic pain, or those who have autoimmune disease, or just other life factors going on that may be getting in the way of them being motivated or physically able to train. And so that's what we do. We make exercise an enjoyable thing for those people.
Awesome. So there's a couple of things you touched on there that I want to get into a little bit later. It was definitely the pain side of thing, but also just the people that don't enjoy exercise and some of the strategies you go to get them across the line to actually making it a part of their lifestyle. But I wanted to start, you mentioned obviously being a gym owner, enhancing life, and I wanted to just ask how you started out in the fitness industry and got to the point of owning a gym, because we do have a lot of listeners that are young coaches or young trainers that potentially are looking to open their own business and maybe even their own gym down the track. So just you personally, how you started out in the fitness industry and some of your journey to getting to owning a gym.
So I started in the industry basically on accident. I had failed out of college when I was 18, and I was living with my mom, and there was either an email or something online talking about a personal training school for 12 months. And at the time, I had an eating disorder, hated my body, was probably not a huge fan of myself. And I figured, I'm sure personal training would get me in shape. And it was a very superficial goal and want at the time. At the time, I wanted to be a writer, an architect. I don't even remember now. And my mom was willing to pay for it. So she paid $12,000 for me to go through this school. And it was,
awesome.
it was a lot.
Yeah, far out.
And it took you through just, a regular certification like NASM that we all get in the industry and realize all the certifications are just a step. They don't teach you how to coach. They don't teach you how to be a trainer. It's just that step. It gives you the basics, the terminology, but it doesn't actually make you a good personal trainer. So I went through that, and about over halfway, my teacher introduced me to a trainer named Mike Robertson. You all know who that is?
Yeah.
Most people do. I get weirded out when I go into other sides of the industry and they're like, no. And I don't even know how to continue my story anymore. But basically, Mike Robertson, his nickname back in the day was the corrective exercise expert. And he introduced the concept of a neutral spine to me. And what I perceived was if you got people in a neutral spine, you could get them to lift heavy and get them out of pain. And he had multiple examples. He had the power lifter who was in pain and he got them better, but then he also had the rehab person that went all over the place and he got them stronger. And the idea of fixing someone really spoke to me because I grew up watching my mom get fixed. We chiropractors 3 times a week. I had to go to a chiropractor just because they convinced her I needed it. Massage therapist, acupuncturist, like she was always in pain. My mom's back would always go out and she would spend a week in bed. So the idea of fixing someone's posture, I probably really went in that direction because of how I grew up and seeing my mom suffer so much. So that's how I got into the industry. I got introduced to Mike Robertson, and I saw that he wasn't like this peppy motivator, which really spoke to me because I'm an introvert, monotone. I'm not the cheerleader that the school was telling me I needed to be. So I went back to the school and I told them, your program sucks. This guy, Mike Robertson, I had no self-awareness back then either. I was like, the neutral spine and lifting, like we don't even learn like deadlifts here. And they weren't a fan of that. But I got to know Mike and the people around him, and they told me, hey, this power lifter in Lexington does some of the stuff that we do, the breathing stuff that gets you a neutral spine, but then also teaches you how to lift. And that's how I ended up getting into the industry. I interned with him for probably 7-8 months until he could afford to hire me. And because I was so into the breathing and my personality, and I was very monotone, the people who were in a lot of pain or scared to exercise really gravitated towards me. But at the same time, I worked for a power lifter, and the expectation of you got to get people lifting. That's the end goal. It's squats, deadlifts. If not, you're not doing your job. And so many meetings of, Lucy, people don't come to you for breathing. They come to you for lifting. So I was pressured to do that. And the way I got them there, with the knowledge that I had at the time, was if I fix their posture, I get them breathing right, then I can get them lift safely. And I ended up doing that. I got a lot of people in pain lifting with confidence, people who never touched a weight and were scared, thinking that they could only touch 5 pounds without getting injured. I slowly progressed them. And I worked there for about 4 to 5 years, and then the culture was very different of my clientels versus his clientels. And there were a lot of beginner power lifters. And what they started, the culture of, if you do breathing, you're broken. If you do breathing, you must not lift heavy. Or if you do breathing, you're weak. So really trying to separate myself from that, I ended up getting fired. And my boyfriend at the time, who is now my business partner, also worked there, and he also got fired. So we had to figure out what to do. And I had reached out to the school that I told the personal training program sucked, but I had already made it up for them because I gave him another 12 grand because I had just gone through massage school. And I asked him, hey, that gym that you have that sits empty, would you rent it out to me? Because he had a big gym with just the students there, and because he ran a year-long program, and no one used it other than the students. So he wanted us to move in. We spent 30 grand on equipment, and that's how we opened Enhancing Life. So we ended up subleasing a place with a school where we shared a space with a school for about 3 years. And then COVID hit, and the structure of the building wasn't going to work. We had an agreement that our rent was just going to increase and we were going to take over the whole place. And with COVID, that wasn't going to happen. So we had the opportunity to move into a different space where our client owned the building, and that's where we are now.
Awesome.
Cool story. I really enjoyed that story.
I enjoyed it too. I found every time you were talking, I was like, that sounds like Jamie and I. That sounds like Jamie and I. That sounds like Jamie and I. So we had a few very similar experiences like that as well, where we were trying to implement our own stuff and sort of at our old job. We just weren't seeing eye to eye with some of the trainers. So that's Jamie got back from America, Impulse bought a gym, and then 4 years later, we somehow have a gym that isn't open currently, but it is there waiting to be used. So I guess something I like to ask is if there's anything that you would have done differently going back on your opening a gym journey, and any of the mistakes that you potentially might have changed if now looking back in hindsight. You can say no. You can say I did everything perfectly.
Understanding that good intentions don't result in a positive impact. And when it comes to managing an organization, which means someone more than just one person, just yourself, that it requires more than just good intentions. It requires skill sets that not every trainer may have to get everybody on board. And understanding different personality types also come in play, and communication also comes in play. What may seem like someone being really aggressive and mean just means that they're honest and blunt. And someone who is just not motivated to work and not doing their job just wasn't given the structure that they needed. And an example of that is, if you give me a job, I will figure out how to get there. And it may not be efficient. I may spend way too much time on it. I may try to perfect it and then actually never get the task done. But I will figure it out. And when we hired our first employee, I quickly realized that not everybody was like me. Not everybody looks for problems and like, oh, you know what, we could totally do this more efficiently. Or, you know what, this is like wasting our time. We should do it this way. And I'm very opinionated. And in my old job, for the first 4 years, I was allowed to be who I was, which it was looking for problems, trying to find solutions, even though I was just the employee. And when I opened my business, I didn't realize that employees need a lot of structure. Employees need a lot of hand-holding at first. And sometimes what may seem like them doing a really bad job just means that they weren't given enough structure, the expectations weren't met, assumptions were made. What you think is important to them may be totally different. For example, I value continuing ed more than anything. And I was always in a privileged position where my mom paid for a lot of my courses. I didn't have bills, so all my money went to continuing ed. So when we hired our first employee, even though it was a horrible, horrible business decision, because I also sucked at money, still do, I was like, we'll give him $2,000 of continuing ed. Because that's what will motivate him to be good. That's what will motivate him to be better, because you'll see other people in the industry be the best. And like, that's what happened to me. I got exposed to Mike Robertson immediately. Like, I want to be like him. So if I can just give him that opportunity, he will end up being just like me. And he didn't care about continuing it at all. So there was like different values. You can have two great people, but if you value different things, you're never going to see eye to eye. So it wasn't that he was probably a horrible employee. It's just we were awful fit for each other.
Yeah.
And I see that now with all my other failures, even before the industry. We just value different things. Yeah. So with all that said, one of my biggest advice or things that I regret would be not putting values first. It's one of those things that people just roll their eyes. You need to set up your core values for your business. And you think, why? That's stupid. Why would I waste my time coming up with these? Well, because they drive your business, they drive your decision making, your clients, your staff, everything.
It's one of those, because we had a very similar situation in our early days with our first employee, but it's one of those things that I don't think you can expect to know until you go through something like that, where you realize, holy moly, like, as you said, values really do direct everything, and the amount of effort you're going to put into any endeavor is going to come down to your value system and where it is. So I think it is one of those things that you have to sort of go through first to sort of come out the other side, hindsight 2020, and be like, you know what? This is important. This is the new direction. So we definitely feel that.
Yeah, because you don't see the importance. I mean, I drove myself crazy. We paid a consultant $800 a month, and I remember one call, I'm like, is it me? Am I an asshole? Am I a bad boss? Like, is it me or is it him? Like, I don't get it. What is happening? I'm just like going crazy, like extreme ownership, or it's a bad fit. Like, where am I?
No, I feel it.
The old saying, you can take the horse to water, but you just can't make it drink. So you're just trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. Like, it's just not going to work. And that's where you have to obviously hire the right people. And what was that saying, the saying you have, Jamie, that hire for fit, not on competency?
I learned it from Pete Dupuis. So similar, again, we have a very similar story, you and I, Lucy. I went to Cressy Sports Performance about 5 years ago. Same thing, went through my cert, started in the industry, wasn't happy, decided there's got to be more out there. Eric Cressy's my guy. I've read every blog since 2012. I'm just going to go over there, and I did a 5-month internship. And then I actually went to iFast after that as well. So, and I spent 10 days with Bill. But during the Cressy internship, obviously Pete Dupuis there, and he's the co-owner, and he taught me that when you're hiring staff, you can hire on competency, skill set, or you can hire on the fit within the business, personality traits, and all that sort of stuff. And that's always something that I've held in my direction, but I still made the mistake in the first hire of hiring competency, and then it just, the fit wasn't there. And then all of a sudden I was like, what am I doing? And then, very, very similar story, Lucy. I resonate with your story very much.
That's funny. Yeah, I think a lot of us do go through the same, very similar things.
Yeah,
it's the learning curve of becoming a coach. One thing you're quite big on, and you've mentioned it a couple of times already, is communication. And I actually read one of your articles that was, I believe it was called Less Science, More Purpose. And you spoke about how you, over time, realized that clients probably don't really care about all the sciencey crap that I've learned, even though we as coaches find it cool and interesting, and it does help us apply principles to clients, but they don't really care about that stuff. They more care about how I'm going to fix them and get them better and get them stronger and get them feeling good. Can you tell us a little bit how your communication skills have improved over time and some of the steps you took to actually improving them?
Yeah, I would say it was a combination of starting at the school with, when I moved into the school and I started working with students, because I got them on day one at the same time that they were taking anatomy classes, and I couldn't even get them to understand pelvis or thorax. And I struggled with them and realizing, like going through with all the students, realizing, so if students learning anatomy can't even remember like where the hamstring is, it made me reflect of the terminology that I used with my clients, of trying to explain to them the diaphragm, trying to explain to them exhalation, and just like, you go through the little moves, even though you're explaining it in a simple way, you're still using anatomy terms, you're still trying to get them to understand anatomy terms. And what I was getting was just a bunch of fake head nods of like, yeah. I don't know what you're saying. But I was always really good at the coaching side of things. So I would produce results with an intervention, get people to touch their toes for the first time or get them to do something. And I think that kind of biased me into thinking that I was doing a good job. So when I started working with the students, I reflected on how I communicated with clients. And then I also started learning at the same time, because I had opened the gym, about marketing. And it was a client who came to me and asked me to go to coffee because he wanted to help me. And I had just learned through passing through, I'm sure you know him, Lance Boyke, about copywriting. So I didn't even know copywriting was a job. I had a client write my website because we had just built it. And I told Lance, I was like, a client wrote me a website. He's like, oh yeah, you found a copywriter and paid them $1,000. And that was the first time I had seen like that term. And I looked up copywriter. And then the next week, my client's like, let's go get coffee. So he has his laptop. He pulls my website up and he's like, read the first paragraph. And like, I read it. And he goes, tell me how that makes you feel. Like fake and cheesy as fuck. He was like, and that's how people will feel when they read it. And I was like, are you a copywriter? Yes. Oh my gosh, you'll help me? So I think we either paid him or traded with him, I forget, but he had me answer all these questions in the perspective of my client. What are my what's my biggest fear? What are my goals? And even questions that I never even thought of, like, how will people see me after I work with Lucy? And an example of someone who's obese, maybe, like, how will people see you? Well, they'll stop looking at you like you're lazy. And they'll stop looking at me, and like if we're talking about someone in pain, they'll stop looking at me like the weak one or the fragile one who can never do anything. So questions like that. And what are the roadblocks that are stopping me from saying yes? And it's answers like will they hurt me? Or I've been hurt in the past. So I really got to learn a lot of like the language that he used, and he gave me this envelope or through Google Drive. And on the side, he talked about language standards. Like, these are the words that you use. What do you call your clients? Because you can't call them members and then clients and then students and then ninjas. It's like, develop language standards so people understand what you're saying. That's important so you can have this consistent message. So that was like my first introduction to copywriting and marketing, and seeing how the words I was using was not matching what people understood or their goals. So a mix of working with the students, realizing I'm going over everybody's head. Like, these students still don't understand abs, and it's been 4 weeks, and I have them in class for 4 hours, and now a client is 10 minutes. Like, they're definitely not getting it.
Yeah.
And then copywriting and marketing, understanding like what is really valuable for the client. What do they really care about? They don't care about breathing. They want to not squat without knee pain. Like, that's what I would write on the website. So that's how I would communicate with them. And then the third component was meeting someone in the industry who was just really good at communicating. And he just drew me in immediately. I was like under a spell. And then one day I saw this video on YouTube of like how to get everybody to love you. And I'm looking at the video, I'm like, holy shit, this is what he used. Like, I fell for this trap. These are the questions, this is what he complimented me on. And then I realized, wow, this is a skill. So being good at communicating doesn't mean I have to change my personality. Like, I can still be an introvert, shy person, but I can work on this skill to communicate a message. And so I took classes like on Skillshare, like how to become a better communicator, how to ask better open-ended questions. And like anything, I obsess over it, and then I just practice a lot.
A lot. I might actually have to get you after the show to direct me to some of that stuff, because running this podcast, I've found that naturally I hope my communication skills, my questioning has become better over time, but it's something that I do want to keep continuing to improve on, because it is, as you said, a skill, and so I might get you to direct me after the podcast to some of those YouTube videos. Now, you also talk a lot about, actually, this is a quote I think I took from that article. If you go from no strength to some strength, your life gets easier. And I've just put it here because I really, really liked that quote, because you obviously work, as you said, with a lot of people that they haven't started out exercising or training when you get them. They might have quite a negative relationship with them. How do you go about getting them comfortable with strength training? Because there can be quite this big barrier, especially I know with females, sometimes thinking that they're going to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger, or they're going to get bigger. Or how do you bring them to be comfortable with the idea of strength training, lifting weights, getting stronger, and being in that environment?
Language is a huge part of that. Not saying that you're going to get a super fun, hard workout, because if you're dealing with people who are in pain, who are super scared, there's a barrier between the goals. Because with marketing, and then I've even struggled with this with copywriters and then people who are really good at marketing who don't understand people in pain, they'll say, but what they really want is they want to look good naked. What they really want is they want to get fit. But what they don't really understand is that these people don't perceive themselves as capable of ever getting there. So the language that you use when it comes to marketing, I don't use those. And I say we're really good at getting you to have exercise feel good, not hurting you, and meeting you where you're at, even if it's just one exercise, even if it's just one activity. Like, if that's all we start with, that is totally fine. So that's, I would say, the beginning of it is the language that I use to get them in. And then when they come in, our onboarding process does seem to get rid of some of the fears that people have, because I do start people with 1 or 2 exercises. If we're dealing with someone who is in persistent pain, very deconditioned, very scared, lots of maladaptive beliefs. If I'm dealing with someone who just has an exercise, but they're a little scared, we'll do a little more in that session. But what I try to do is I get them used to these moves. You feel your hamstrings, feel your abs, And then I say, all right, that's it. We'll see how you handle that. And then from there, it all depends on how they handled it, how confident they felt in that, what happened, or like how they communicate with me after that day. So if they come back the next day and I ask them how they felt, and I go, oh, yeah, it was fine. I'm like, awesome. So today we're going to do about twice the amount of work. But if they come to me and they're like, my back hurt for like 2 days, I have to modify. And I either have to like bring that one exercise and turn it into 4 different exercises. So with these people, we find 4 activities that don't flare them up, that they feel confident in. And we have so much consistency within our program. So from a trainer's perspective, when they look at our onboarding, they see the first day and then they see the second day and they're like, well, that's like a 45-minute warm up. It's like they're doing the same thing over and over again. It's like 5 exercises. And then they do that the second day. And then they come in their third session, they do the same warm up. It now just takes 15 minutes because we cut out the sets. But then they're squatting, doing a short seated landmine press, assisted step up, which is basically like a single leg squat, and then a short seated cable pull down. And then they do that same workout for 6 sessions in a row, and they will progress within those lifts. So from there, what I'm thinking is happening is we're building some tissue tolerance because we're keeping things the same. When people have way too much variety and not enough consistency, like if they're only squatting on Tuesday with you just that one time, and then they don't squat again until Tuesday again. If we're trying to build tolerance and adaptability, it's like taking 2 steps forward and 1.5 steps back. So what I find is if we add a ton of consistency, they really get comfortable and confident in these moves that they're getting stronger without them even realizing that they're pushing themselves harder, just because it's like, so it's like a very linear progress in the beginning, and we're building tolerance to those positions. So when I push them a little harder towards the end of that onboarding program, this is like the best scenario is when they say, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm not gonna be able to walk tomorrow. And then they wake up the next day and they feel fine. I go, wow, I'm totally fine. And now it's like we're changing that relationship of like, you can grunt a little bit and like, oh, that was hard, and be totally fine. But if I wouldn't have built that tissue tolerance over the 3 weeks that they're in, then maybe pushing them to that feeling of I'm not going to be able to walk tomorrow totally flares them up, or they're super sore. So now the connection of pushing it in the gym is also connected to I can't walk tomorrow.
Yeah, I really like how you're coming from the 2 angles. You're coming from the language angle and sort of the belief angle and what they want from it, but then also understanding the physical, physiological sort of processes as well. I think something else that would be, and from our own experience as well with what we do, but with people that have had maybe poor outcomes in the past with training, whether it be pain or just not getting the results or something like that they want, and in those initial phases, like you're saying, like the onboarding period or that onboarding program is getting wins with movement and getting them to a point where they feel like they're actually getting it, quote unquote, getting it, rather than bringing new things in every week. And then you got to teach them. And the whole time they're just feeling like they're not getting anywhere because they're really not getting anywhere. They're not building that skill. So the consistency of the same movements, which sort of goes against the grain of the general industry, so to speak. Think about like group classes, boot campy type of things. But at the end of the day, getting good at the things and doing them regularly is what's going to get you the results, regardless of where you're starting. So I do really like that. That's cool.
Yeah,
and a lot of people, it's funny, they don't notice. Like I had a lady who had surgery, and I've struggled with her in the past, and I mentioned it to her, hey, I'm going to give you the same program for the next few weeks. I really think, and that's how I sell it. I'm like, I really think we can progress a lot faster because now you're squatting 60 times in a week instead of 30. And she just looked at me like, okay, how many workouts do I usually get? And in my head, I'm like, you didn't even notice. I think a lot of the pressure that trainers feel is put on themselves from them, not the client.
Yeah, definitely.
I can relate to that. Mm-hmm. I was going to say I can relate to that wholeheartedly, because I always feel as a coach, as a trainer, I'm getting paid and I have to make a change. Oh, the program's finished. We have to make a change. We have to change something up. And I work with, most of my clients are like powerlifters in some way, shape or form. And I've realized as I've gotten older, a bit more switched on, that making no changes is making a change. That's you as the coach are making the change, not making the change in the best interest of getting that person towards their goals. And that's okay too. You don't have to change everything all the time.
Yeah, and you can change it too with like our onboarding. You add novelty to the exercises they're already learning. You add a little more intensity, you add a little more range, you add a different move. It goes from static to dynamic. And I write that on the program. So we have like the 6 days, and I would write little comments, like kind of like goals, like move to no box, move to 6DC. So I almost throw all these like novelties and wins and accomplishments throughout the same program.
Yeah, it's awesome. I really liked that answer. That was a really good answer, because that's something that early on Jamie and I struggled with. We used to get a lot of clients at our old work that weren't really interested in strength training. They just wanted to get sweaty and do a boot camp. And lately I've actually gone the opposite, whereas everyone comes, mostly because we are Melbourne strength culture. People are coming because they want to get stronger and they're already walking in the door. I want to lift weights. I want to deadlift this much. I want to squat that much. And so it's pretty easy for us, but I just wanted to get a bit more of an insight on how you go about that, because you are dealing with some people that have pain as well, which I guess I want to switch over to that topic, because that's a rabbit hole in itself, is the pain side of things. And obviously I know you've spoken a lot about things just not being structural. Like sometimes pain can be a form of sensitization in the nervous system. How do you go about explaining to people that pain isn't always a structural thing potentially, and that there can be some form of processing within the brain and nervous system that may be causing people to feel pain and have painful experiences?
That's a very difficult question to answer, just because in order to, and this is just from my experience of making clients mad, messing up, it's not in my head. I'm like, no, that's not what I meant. Yeah. Just because I don't mind practicing and failing. And it's like, I learned about this and I was excited of, oh, the bone on bone doesn't have to mean they always have to feel pain. But people are not ready to hear that information sometimes. And the way it's approached when you are trying to explain how, like the process of how pain happens, and you try to explain that it's an experience, from your brain, and that makes them feel like you're telling them it's in their head. So explaining pain of like the process of how pain works doesn't seem to go well with people. And the big component that we have to take in consideration is you first have to get to know the person before you know how to educate them or support them, because people are so misguided with pain and they have very different relationships with pain. And you first have to see if they even are open to learning a new way. And an example was with a client, which was so interesting. He mentioned he was having knee pain. And I didn't say anything. And then he said, but these things usually work themselves out. I was like, yes. Oh my gosh, you deserve a prize. Like, this is what I try to explain this to people. It takes me months sometimes to get people to realize that the body is adaptable. And I was just, because we'd never talked about pain. So I was just really proud that he said that. And then in that same session, deadlifts were in his program. So this is an older guy who's never deadlifted before. And I hadn't seen him deadlift, so I thought he had with my business partner. And I picked a weight, it was 40 pounds. And he was like, oh, no. Remember, I have the herniated disc. And I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. Like normally, once we get to deadlifts, people aren't even thinking that anymore. And then I'm like, tell me more about that. And then he said, well, I injured myself when I fell playing the sport. So there I know that his perception of what happened, which could have been, but most likely not, was when he fell, that's when this herniated. So that pain that he experienced was a herniated disc going. So if he experiences that pain, that means that disc is being pushed. Versus you just had back pain and it got worse and got worse, got an MRI and got diagnosed. But the way, like what happened in his experience was, now I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, okay, so he thinks like that's when it happened. Gotcha. And then I'm like sitting there thinking like, okay, so what am I going to say next? And then I brought up because then he said, yeah, so when I feel that, like it's that disc bulging out. And then I'm like, okay, so this is what he believes. All right, so what am I going to say? And then I said, yeah, what's interesting is, because he mentioned his friends always having pain. I mentioned the statistics of how, some statistics have shown that the older you get, the less pain you experience, but the more structural issues you'll have, like degenerative disc and bulging disc, but the pain is different. And his response to that was almost like not listening, like this is what I'm feeling. And that's where I decided, like, this is not the time. This is not the time to explain to him that structure doesn't mean that he's having pain. And now I have to like figure out how am I going to come up with a plan and slowly educate him, because he was not in the space of coming up with a new way of thinking. When he feels his back pain, it doesn't mean that his disc is like bulging out. This person needs like an article sent to him, and then have him read it and see what is his response. Like, can I send him an article where they talk about deadlifts and bulging disc? And does he get upset? Does he get defensive? Does he try to explain to me why he doesn't want to deadlift? Or does he tell me, wow, that was really interesting. I didn't realize that they could heal. So it's just like really trial and error with people of like, how do they respond to this information? And figuring out analogies and stories or old flare-ups. Like sometimes you have to wait for them to flare up 2 to 3 different times so you can say, well, remember when deadlifts hurt your hamstring, but then after 2 weeks it was fine? And now like connect the two, because they were complaining that their elbow hurt and they didn't want to do push-ups anymore. So I'm like, hey, remember how that happened, but then after 2 weeks it was fine and your body adapted? Oh yeah, well, the body is very adaptable. So that's usually what the process is. So I almost had to like prove it to them without them knowing it. And then I was able to use that story to like prove my point or educate them.
Show them the light. I think every coach goes through it, the process of just shattering beliefs or attempting to shatter beliefs, because you learn this new information. And you said earlier that continued education is high value to you. And I'm sure you've gone through it, where you go to a course and you're like, this is the answer. And then you just try to broad sweep it onto everybody. And then that was something that I learned when I learned this BPS, more of this, and started getting into all of this. Not structure doesn't equal pain or discomfort or anything like that. And then all of a sudden you just broad sweep it on everyone, but everybody's got closed ears, and it fits well within the language things you've discussed, and meeting them where they're at with their understanding and using their language, their terms. So it just marries everything together in this final piece, being that try not to shatter beliefs just because you want to shatter beliefs or anything, because half the time they won't even accept it, and they won't even, because they're just not ready to hear it, or they're not ready to experience that there is a different option or something else out there. So it sort of brings everything together, which is
good. And then they don't have the context. And like on my onboarding, I have to take them through different moves. And I love to find a move that bothers them, like half kneeling. Half kneeling hurt their knee. And a couple weeks later, even maybe sessions later, I make sure I point that out, like, oh, that hurt your knee. Okay, no worries. And then a few sessions later, we go back to half kneeling. How's that on your knee? It's fine, because I don't even remember it hurt. I'm like, that's amazing. So remember how it hurt like a few weeks or a few sessions ago? So like, this is kind of like how the body adapts. So this is the process. So there, it's like I'm already setting that expectation of like, this is just how things work. And then a lot of people just kind of believe me. I'm like, okay, cool. I guess this is how we deal with pain now. It might hurt in one session, and then a few sessions later, it might not. And maybe they're skeptical. And if they're skeptical, I need to be prepared to educate them of like, okay, what do you mean by that? What do you mean it's adaptable? Or what do you mean that I'm able to do it just because it hurt?
Nice. Yeah, the pain thing is quite, because a lot of people can become quite attached to their pain. It almost becomes like part of their identity. And so for you to sit there and say, well, it's maybe not structural and it can be somewhere in the processing of, your experience, it's in my head. And people think, but you're not quite saying that. Like you are your brain, and somewhere in that processing, we're not quite sure where the pain is coming from, how it's working, but it's still real. It's not in your head, and that doesn't make it not real. But I think that's something that's hard for people to understand. And the other thing is too, I think trainers are obviously a little bit lower in the medical hierarchy. So if someone has a surgeon or a doctor or a physio tell them something specifically, that you have pain because you have bone on bone here, or you have pain because you have a herniated disc there, and then you as the trainer come along and say something different, you're sort of on potentially the lower end of the hierarchy, and that can be even harder to get through to them, because you're just the trainer, you're just the coach. What do you So I guess it's be hard to break that barrier sometimes. Is that an experience you've had where someone has been told specifically by a doctor, a surgeon, or someone that they have this and that's what's causing their pain, and then you've had trouble breaking that barrier down?
All the time. It's less now, and that's a reason why I start people so slow who are in persistent pain. Maybe they could handle more, but if they have a flare-up and they go back to their PT and their PT is like, oh, you shouldn't have done this, it's like, that's what I'm trying to avoid, which is why I go slow. And having physical therapists have different perspectives is really hard when they're on a reoccurring membership, basically, with a PT. But if they're seeing a physical therapist, like short term, I tend to be really good at twisting the physical therapist's words into my favor of, oh, I could see why they would say that, and just turning around more into a positive of, like, well, they told me not to squat. Like, oh, I could see why they would say that. And then, but if you do it this way, it's fine. So with PTs, I find myself doing that a lot. With doctors, very similar, or I end up saying things like, the doctors are really good at their job, and their job is to diagnose. Their job is to find, cancer and treat disease. What they're not good at is coaching. What they're not good at is educating you on what that MRI really meant. Because the diagnosis, which is what their job is bone on bone. That this is what the information shows. But that kind of education can't come with a new client. Like those kind of conversations of where, like, no, actually, this is what it is people I've had for a year or two or three. And the trust didn't get there on accident. I definitely know how to play my outside life of Lucy Hendricks as a speaker. I definitely share when I'm speaking all over the place. I definitely talk about how I train physical therapists. I mentor physical therapists. So I definitely know how to, like, influence what I'm doing to get the clients to see Lucy knows what she's talking about. Like, just last month, I did a seminar on language, and it was on purpose that I put the speakers on there because I was there with someone with a PhD and two doctors. Jared is the Memphis Grizzlies physical therapist. So it was on purpose that I put my name on there, talking about pain, talking about language. The client may never click on the link and look at the seminar, but that's just like, oh, okay, my trainer knows what she's doing. My trainer knows what she's talking about. That's definitely an advantage that I have.
Nice. Cool. I like that. It was good answer. Building that image for yourself. Now I want to flick over before we start wrapping up, because we have been going quite some time, which has been awesome. But you talk a lot about the holistic approach to health. And I know that's even in your business, I believe, on your Instagram, under your business name, the holistic approach to health. I want to ask you what that means to you. How do you define that, and what is that to you as a trainer and a coach?
It meant that I looked at the body in a way where in order for you to get healthy, you need to get to the root cause of all your health problems. And You need to do things the non-conventional way and be perfect. And that idea of like what health is has really changed, because when I came up with the name and when I thought of being this like holistic trainer that looked at all these aspects of people's lives, like sleep and nutrition and mindset and stress management and fitness, that I was going to be able to have the skill sets to address all these things. So that's where the idea came from, was trying to get people to look at all these other things. But as I've been in the industry for a while now, I'm really realizing that so much is out of my control. And I even question that name right now. What really is our job? Because we really don't have control over a lot of stuff. We don't have control over people's sleep, because what if they have sleep apnea? What if they, their husband snores? What if they're working night shift? We don't have control over people's financial situation. We don't have control over people's past trauma, their mental illness. So now, if I were to choose a different name, which I don't know what it is, my role, instead of like holistic, trying to get to the root cause of your health problems and make you a healthy person, now my role is, let me meet you where you're at. Let's look at all these other lifestyle factors and let me come from a place of understanding and understand how this is impacting your ability to train, and let me adapt my training to whatever you have going on. And slowly, this can be the place where you figure out your health and all the uncertainties and all the unanswered questions, because that's what it's going to take. A lot of uncertainty, a lot of unanswered questions, a lot of failures. And this gym can be the place that you can do that, where we're not going to judge you. We're not going to shame you for falling off the bandwagon for 6 months because of you were so depressed or just life got in the way. So it's this space where we try to understand the person as a whole and understand that all these different factors are influencing people's ability to train, in a space where the training is adapted to whatever that person needs, which is either strength training or mindful movement. So whatever it is, we will help you figure that out.
Yeah, awesome. I know I've heard you speak a lot about, I know you touched on like mindful movement. There's sometimes with your clients and even yourself that it's not always about getting in the gym, and you might, usually you train 3 times a week, but this week you're like, stuff it, you went to the gym once, and the other 2 days you did yoga and went for a walk instead. And I think that's something that I've definitely as a coach progressed from. I think Jamie's the same, is that there is a bigger picture at play with people in their lives, and that it's not always about you have to get in the gym and train 4 days a week because that's what we programmed and you have to do all your sets, because people just don't work that way. And sometimes giving them a session off and go, you know what, go for a walk and spend time with your girlfriend, they're going to have a more positive experience with their training, and then be more likely to come back in on Monday and be ready to attack it and get stuck into it. Something, I know you speak a lot about meditation as well, and it's something that Jamie and I still try and implement it 10 minutes a day, and I know Jamie's done it in the past as well. Have you been meditating along quite some time?
Well,
you personally?
A year.
Nice. What has been your experience with it, and how have you found it? Because it's something that I try and guide people towards. Obviously, again, you can't force people to do it. You can educate them, guide them. This is something that could really help you. But you personally, being someone that has done it now for a year, what has been some of the benefits you've found within your own health and mental health?
It completely, like everything though, is a combination of things, but it completely changed my life. This last year, or in the spring, I probably hit my lowest of low and was suicidal. Just didn't want to live anymore, and couldn't get over the idea that there was just no way that I could not feel this way. There was no way that I could not worry about these things. Like, there's no way that I couldn't just, there's just no possibility of me getting out of this hole. Like, I couldn't not, even because my life was great. I had many opportunities. So looking at my life, it's just like, I have a great life. So there's just no way out. And I ended up working with Seth Oberst, who does a lot of trauma work. and he does a lot of work online. And then I also started working with a therapist through online. That one went okay. Seth really was the person that came to me from a place of understanding. And I think that's really influences like what I'm doing with the gym now, is like I want to make people feel like, you know, I understand like you're not like this because you're lazy, or I understand that you're not like this because you want to be this way. And Seth was the first person that did that to me because of the things that I had gone through, the things that I did. He was the first person who basically made me believe you were doing the best that you could. Like, you smoked weed since the moment you woke up to the moment that you went to bed, because you were just trying to cope. You were doing the best that you could, and really even being proud of myself of like, I could have taken that further, but I just left it at weed. I just smoked weed all day and wrote content and made things and spoke about stuff. But I could have totally been worse. I mean, I could have killed myself. I could have gone and turned into an alcoholic. So, and I could have lost my business, and none of those things happened. So I should be pretty proud of myself. And I did do the best that I could. And I think like changing that mindset of, okay, this is not because you're a horrible person. And then I started focusing on my meditation. And the way I started was starting a book club at the gym that not a lot of people signed up for. And people actually ended up hating the book, and I ended up hating the book. So we didn't really even end up doing the book. But the client who did teach mindfulness or mindful eating had a lot of input and a lot of good feedback. And that is what got me meditating consistently. And what happened was 2 months in, it wasn't like I woke up and realized, oh, I'm better. Or it's not like you or what I should say is, when it comes to meditation, you're not going to just like sit there and meditate and like feel better. The results that you get with meditation is 2 months later, you get up and you reflect back 2 months ago and you're like, holy shit, I'm a different person. Like, oh wow, I am better. I'm like I'm like not doing this, and this is better. So it's more of like reflecting back versus the immediate result, which is hard for people to want to do that or believe that it works because you're not getting that instant feedback. And from there, I probably stopped meditating on and off a few times. But in September, we did our first like big meditation challenge at our gym, and over half of our clients participated. And I think the reason why they participated was because I was very open about my own struggles. I talked about being suicidal. I talked about setbacks. I talked about not being able to train for 3 months because I was so depressed and so fatigued. So the meditation challenge really challenged me and kept me accountable to continue to do it. And then I ended up falling and getting a concussion. But it actually ended up being a good thing because things got so bad for me that my business partner ended up calling my mom, which I had not told her any of this. I had a big mental breakdown. Like I hit this metal thing and I had like blood all over me. And my business partner's like, all right, you're being taken away. I'm going to call your mom. It's time for your mom to be involved. Because I was doing all these good things for me, but then I was like starting to get worse. So I was like driving myself crazy. I was like, I thought I was better. Like I thought I was doing everything right. What I didn't realize was getting a concussion can impact your mental health. And the positive thing about that was my mom came and she was like, I will pay for therapy, because I'd already maxed my card out on my other therapist. And she's like, I'll pay for therapy. You can go once a week. And the therapist was amazing. And she introduced the concept of the range protocol, which is changing your thoughts. Because people who have really bad depression and anxiety have a lot of catastrophic thinking, which means thinking things are worse than what they are, or thinking that bad things are going to happen. They're mind readers. They're always thinking people are against them. Like all the negative thoughts that people talk about having. And the idea that you should just change them. And that's what I've always been told. Like, just be positive, or just don't think the worst, or no, it's nothing, or don't worry about it. Stop catastrophizing. Like that was just never a realistic thing for me to do. and working through with my therapist of changing your thoughts, because she went through the list, like, all right, catastrophic thinking, and she described it. Mind reading, she described it. And then shoulding, like, I should have done this, I should have said this. Ruminating, and she's like, do any of these sound familiar? I'm like, yeah, every single one of them, all the time, every day. Like, that's all I do. I can't stop. Like, I can't stop my thoughts. I can't just stop thinking that. And then when I really respect someone, that you can tell me anything. You can get me to change anything. And so my therapist was that. She's like, well, actually, you can get your thoughts to change, but it's a process. And this is after like having months of meditation under my belt. And so the idea is like, you're able to recognize you're having that thought. So example, like my cat, like he's licking too much. Like, oh my gosh, he has kidney cancer. Like, because he's licking and he's going to die. And it's like, recognize you're having that thought, and then challenging, like, is that really true? Does he really have kidney cancer? Or it could just be allergies, or it could just be a UTI. So he doesn't really have kidney cancer. And just like slowly working through these thoughts and changing the way you think. And it started working, which I was amazed. And I had nothing else to like blame but the meditation. It's like, if I would have never been able to get to that point of being mindful, being able to pay attention and being able to be present, I would have never been able to have those extra changes of thoughts and behaviors and any of that. And now, after this pandemic, and I got really into being more mindful and being more present, I can't even like recognize a person last year. I was explaining to my best friend like the mental breakdown. I'm like, that was me. Because we were watching a movie and the lady was having a mental breakdown. And she's like, wow, that's crazy. I'm like, that was me. That was me. That's great. Wow. Like, how did I get to that? I got there. Like that, like I can't even imagine getting there right now. And I will get a little bit anxious, but not like I was. All the thoughts that I thought, I will never stop thinking this. I will never stop worrying about this. I'll never stop feeling this way. No, it's not there anymore. And I do credit meditation.
It's awesome that you've had, that well done on all of that, because I'm sure that wouldn't have been an easy journey. So it's awesome to hear that you're doing far better now.
Thank you for being so open and honest with all that. Really, there was some good insight. I think you said something there that you ask yourself, is this true? And that's something that I've actually been exposed to by Pete, and it's from a lady, Byron Katie, where you have a thought and you have to ask yourself, is this thought true? So like, for example, it'll be, I'll use Jamie. Jamie's pissed off with me because of this reason. And I've just assumed it. And I'm thinking Jamie's pissed off with me. But I actually ask myself, is that 100% true? And you go, hang on, no, it's not. I've just made all that up. So then it's just that helped me a lot, being like, is this true? Because you end up going on these thought spirals of from starting from this thought all the way down to, Jamie wants to fire me. He doesn't want me working at the gym anymore or something like that. I just thought this was the first example that came to my head. And when really it was probably nothing to do with that. He brushed you off or something because he was thinking about something else that was going on in his head, and he had a big phone call to make or something. Like, anyway, but that was just, so that I found that I really resonated with that. And that's helped me a lot. That whole, is this actually true, what I'm thinking? But I really like that, the whole changing your thoughts thing, because it can seem quite a tough challenge to change your thoughts. Because the one thing I felt when I've felt really anxious or down, and I definitely felt at the start of lockdown 1 for us, we're into our second lockdown, and again, Pete helps me with this, is that you can't will yourself out of how you're feeling sometimes, and that it's okay to just accept that you are feeling down and flat, and being kind to yourself was something that really sort of resonated with me. And I think of it now, if I'm feeling really, really anxious because of external circumstances such as a pandemic, that you're just sick. It's like you're physically sick. And what would you do to yourself if you're physically sick? You'd go and rest. You probably maybe not train as hard in the gym. You eat good food. You drink a lot of water. Get better sleep. And so that's what I try and implement when I'm feeling down and out like that. So I really, really really resonated with that story, and thank you for sharing that with us. Yeah, I guess. Sorry, James.
I was going to say just maybe the final question, because we've given some resources that we've shared with people around meditation or just like processing thoughts differently and all that sort of stuff. Do you have anything like a YouTube channel or an app that you do use to help, or that you often recommend if people are looking to get into it or maybe looking for a change within the practice?
Yes, I would recommend Sam Harris. His initial course. That's probably like my only exposure to Sam Harris is his meditation course, and I really enjoyed it. And I got a lot of inspiration from it building my own mindful movement course. What I liked about it was that it was different every time. So it keeps kind of people locked in, or my clients, that's what they told me. Everybody who went through it, it's like, it's a different lesson. And so the other thing is he also tells you why it's important and why you would benefit from it. And it's progressive. So it's like an actual course versus the same meditation for 30 days and you almost get bored of it. And so I suggest that, but then I also suggest my mindful movement classes. So those are either full on 30-minute classes, like a Zoom class, like a yoga class. And then I'm also about to release my mindful movement course, which is 5 to 10 minutes. And it's very similar of like a progressive thing where you go through it for 6 weeks. And there I'm using movement and breathing to bring awareness back to your body. So you're really paying attention either by 3 different things: a cue that I'm telling you to do a certain way, like I'm asking you to roll your hips instead of arch your back, or I'm asking you to reach instead of shrugging. So you're paying attention to that cue. A visual, so peeling, picture your hips peeling or deflating or inflating, melting. So I'm giving them a visual to hold on to. And then a feeling, because my coaching is very detailed, and if you're fully exhaling, I know for sure you're feeling abs. I'm giving you those anchors of feel your hand. You're going to feel your hamstring. So like pay attention to that. So my 30-minute classes are like 30 minutes of that. And then my course, it's more of a progressive 10 to 15-minute daily movement meditation.
I can build into it. Very nice. Awesome. Sam Harris is definitely one of our go-tos. So
never responded. We actually when we started the podcast a couple of years ago, we always set our goals to get Sam Harris on the podcast, and we emailed him one day about 2 months ago. We've never heard back. I got a generic email back, and then I was like, "This guy's not jumping on our podcast."
One day we'll get him.
You have to put it out. You have to put it out there.
I did that with Terry Walls. You know who that is? Dr. Terry Walls.
No, I don't.
She's a big deal functional medicine practitioner who's also very political. And one day I was like, I want to interview her. And I sent her this email of like, well, I wanted to interview her. And then I get the generic of like, is this an emergency? Call 911. And like, her courses. Like, and I'm like, oh man. But then 2 weeks later, her assistant emailed back. She goes, oh, she would love to be interviewed by you. And when she got on, you could tell I was like starstruck. I'm like, hi.
So there's hope for us. There's hope for us. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, one day. We really thank you for jumping on and taking the time to chat with us. You know, it's your Friday evening there for you. So you finished a big week of work. So thank you for jumping on. If people wanted to find you, contact you, where's the best place for them to find you? Get in touch with you. Get in touch with some of your work. Where can they do that?
I'm mostly active on Instagram, Lucy_Hendricks. And then my website is coachlucyhendricks.com. And then through there, you can find either my like appointments. I have like a 15-minute consultation in case you want to work with me. Either you're a coach who wants to learn how to coach better, all the breathing stuff, how to communicate with people in pain, or if you just want to be coached by me and have me give you a movement routine or a program.
Yep. Awesome. Cool. We'll have them in the links for the show as well.
Perfect.
Cool. Thank you.
Done. Thanks, Lucy.
Thank you very much for coming on. That was a really good chat. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, I had fun.